Welcome to this video on measures of variation part 3. In this video, we will compare two histograms and determine which has a larger range. We will also compare two histograms and determine which has a larger standard deviation. Let's get started. In the pictures below, which has the larger range? If you'd like, you can pause this video, answer the question on your own, and then unpause it to see if you are correct. First, let's notice that both histograms have the same mean. They're both centered around 9. However, graph A has the smaller range. Remember, we calculate range by taking the maximum and subtracting off the minimum. So in this case, we have 11 minus 7, which is 4. Graph B has a range of about 12 to 6 or 6. So you can see that graph A has the smaller range and graph B has the larger range. Which of these two graphs has a larger standard deviation? Well, we probably can't compute mathematically what the standard deviation is, so we'll have to use what we can see from the graph. Graph A actually has the smaller standard deviation because values are more closely grouped or clustered around the mean. Notice that the central column or bar is higher, and then as we move out away from the mean, the height of the bars decreases. If we look at the histogram B, the height of the middle bar is lower than that of histogram A, and the height of the bars decreases more slowly as we move out from the center. So in graph B, we have more data that is farther from the mean. And remember, our standard deviation is the average distance from the mean. So the average distance from the mean is larger in graph B than it is in graph A. Let's look at another example. Which of these two graphs has a larger range? Well, remember, range is the maximum minus the minimum. So in the first graph, we have a range of 2,000 minus 0, or 2,000. In the second graph, we have a range of 1,550 minus 50, or 1,500. So it looks like graph A has a larger range of 2,000, and graph B has a smaller range, which is 1,500. Now let's look at the standard deviation of the two graphs. Which of these two graphs has the larger standard deviation? If you'd like, you can pause this video, think about it, and write down your answer, and then unpause the video to see if you are correct. Before we answer, let's remind ourselves what the definition of standard deviation is. So remember, the standard deviation is the average distance from the mean. Which of these two graphs has a lower or smaller average distance from the mean? Well, let's start looking at graph 1. As we move away from the center of the graph, what is happening to the frequency of our data? You can see that it's decreasing. The frequency of our data is decreasing as we move to the right of our mean. Also, as we move to the left of our mean, the frequency is decreasing. Now let's look at the right-hand graph. As we move to the left of our mean, what is happening to our frequency? The frequency is actually increasing. That means as we move away from the center, there are more data points, not less data points. Same thing as we move right. At first, it looks like our frequency is decreasing, but then this last column, the frequency increases. So on the right-hand graph, we have more data points that are farther away from the mean. And remember that the standard deviation is the average distance from the mean. So what does that mean? That means that graph A is going to have the smaller standard deviation because the frequency decreases as we move away from the center. And for graph B, you have a larger standard deviation because your frequency is increasing as you move away from the center.